Hey, welcome. This is Gordon First Person Tests, and today we're gonna work on the fuel tank. We're gonna make this possible through a process of modeling, unwrapping, and texturing using 3ds Max and Substance Painter. Without further ado, let's just do it. Alright, here we are. So we're gonna start working on the fuel tank using some simple things as we usually do, which is gonna be a plane in this case as usual. So we're gonna try to make sure that this is gonna be something rectangular. I'm gonna change the color to something that we like, and then after that we're gonna start to give it the look it's supposed to get. So the first thing we're going to do is to create that shape in the center, that that interesting carved shape or X shape in the center. So we're going to connect the dots here, connect the vertices in order to get it right, and then from that point we're gonna kind of take this is gonna be the starting point that is gonna take root to expand it to other areas. So here we are trying to kind of set where the X mark is gonna be, and of course is gonna have to be smoothed a little bit. So we're gonna use the chamfer tool right there. Then we're gonna do some interesting things in order to make it practical. For example, we're gonna weld these vertices as a start. This thing is gonna be a little bit tricky, so you're gonna have to focus a little bit here, because what you're gonna see is gonna be a little bit tricky to replicate as well. So make sure that you're doing this correctly. And there are actually a lot of ways to do it. It doesn't have to be this way. This is just one way. It doesn't be that way. All right, you can create your own, or you can figure out your own way to do these things. You just need to get something that looks like the real thing when you are done with the modeling process. Alright, we're trying to actually remove these vertices as a start, but we're gonna figure out a way something that is gonna allow us to make this work practically later on if we face any kind of problems down the road. So we better kind of create a center for this shape here, or this plane here, because it's gonna be split in half later, because we're gonna use a symmetry in order to copy kind of one side to the other side. So now we are actually using the Alt to or the Shift keyboard to and dragging to create copies of these edges, if you don't know how to do this already. So this is very important to create that X mark and then expand in order to make things easier. So you start doing the hard thing, then you're gonna worry about the little things later on. And now we are trying to work even further on this X mark, and of course we're gonna make sure that using this inset we are kind of trying to make a place where this is gonna be located after we extend or extrude it inside, and it's gonna make it easier for us when we are trying to smooth these things this thing out, because it's gonna be solidly supported using this inset we created. Using the cut tool, of course, is gonna make sure that we're gonna remove that edge right there. And as I said before, when we apply the symmetry modifier, this whole thing is gonna be back place, and of course we're gonna be able to get the other half done for us without much work. So as you can see here, the symmetry modifier is actually allowing us to do this very quickly and efficiently. So this tutorial is going to be a little bit long, so you have to kind of be ready to see some cool things and cool tricks if you are a beginner. And if you are used to watching these tutorials, then you're gonna be probably introduced to some new things when we reach some of the most some of the new things that we don't work a lot on this channel, which are unwrapping and texturing. Alright, now we are trying to create the depth for the fuel tank. Okay, and for now on, we will worry about what is it gonna look like on the top and from the bottom. But it's gonna be we had to kind of collapse the symmetry modifier because it doesn't look the same anymore, so we're gonna have to tweak that manually. Okay, now we are trying to kind of complete some of the areas on the side which we can see from this angle, and of course we are adding here some extra edges to allow ourselves to kind of smooth things out a little bit in the center. And later on we're gonna let the smoothing modifier do the work for us. Okay, we will of course, after extruding these edges, we will weld the vertices. This thing is running pretty smoothly so far, and it's not a big of a deal actually. This is something it's kind of entry level, and it's not gonna be very hard for you if you are used to work in 3ds Max. So here we are trying to actually chamfer the size in order to give it some smoothness, and of course we're gonna use the cut tool in order to complete the or kind of fill this empty space here, because we don't want to leave these vertices just hanging right there. We need to kind of create edges that are gonna bridge between kind of become bridges between these empty spaces. As you can see, this is a problem that that exists in 3ds Max, which is kind of display problem when we use like when I use clip in 3ds Max. Okay. Now we're trying to select the borders in order to chamfer these out, and we don't want this to be too steep of a curve. In order to we want it to be a little bit softer, and we want it to be simple. Okay, just one line right there in the center, and we're gonna take care of this because it is ugly. We don't want this at all. Okay, now it looks a little bit cooler. Okay, these areas are gonna represent where the handles of this fuel tank are gonna be located. All right, Alt Q from the keyboard, or just hit that lamp right there, lamp logo in there, and it's gonna isolate this for us. So as a start, we are going to start to add some geometry here, or some lines and segments. A symmetry modifier is a good tool in order to see what's going on the other side. Okay, center these a little bit like this. Put them in the center. And we're gonna do a tricky thing here. So we are trying to create kind of cylindrical tubes in order to play the role of handles. So we are trying to create the proper space right there, and we're gonna create a nice little space. We're gonna chamfer this properly. Right loop, then chamfer. Or we can just use the connect tool as well. It's gonna be a good option. Okay, create an inset right there in order to create that cylindrical selection, or that circular selection that is gonna allow us to create the cylinder. Of course, you're gonna make sure that these vertices are moving along faces in the constraint section. Alright, select these 4 vertices and we're gonna scale them in. So now we're gonna create a line that is gonna be bridging between these two circular selections, or circular areas. And of course, this is gonna allow us to create the tube that is gonna be a bridge between these two areas. Of course, we need to make this a little bit less hard than it is right now by creating some vertices, or just we can leave it as it is. It's not gonna hurt us. Because we can always go back and tweak things and bring them where we want. Okay, enable this in viewport in order to see the tube taking place, or the cylinder taking place. I should say cylinder because this is a cylinder taking place in the 3ds Max viewport. And after that, yeah, the fillet tool is also a good option in order to smooth things out like this. And once we're done, convert it to poly and start deleting some of the unnecessary faces and polygons. And the next step is actually to bridge between the surface and the cylinder. Okay, we're gonna delete these faces and let's try to bridge between those. Alright, there is a technical difficulty here because we can say that the orientation of these faces is a little bit not super cool. They are not facing each other perfectly. There is a 45-degree shift, and trying to we can actually rotate the circle on the plane in order to get this right. This is actually the best possible scenario, but we can overlook this somehow. Alright, actually rotating that was the answer, and it worked. Alright, let's create an inset right there, and of course you're gonna do the same thing, delete and then a bridge. Even though this is not very fancy, it works. All right, we are moving this actually as a clone because we don't want to do the same job over and over again. So we are cloning this in order to get the best results possible. But it seems that there is a thing here we need to do, which is we are going to weld all these vertices, and we better weld them well. All right. Right, we are trying to apply the symmetry here in order to create the other side. And of course we need to work on the bottom side as well because it is important. So bridges right there are important, and of course we're gonna add some segment there in order to bridge underneath the surface. All right, fine. So actually we're adding this in order to make the bridging process possible because every edge has to meet another edge on the other end of the bridging process. So this should do it. Or you can count them one by one if just to make sure that you are doing this properly. Because you don't want to bridge and there is a missing edge on the other side. For example, this one here, we forgot to add. And you want to stick to quads, of course, which means polygons with 4 edges. Okay, let's select that area right there, and boom. This is the symmetry as it should look. Okay, we're gonna continue to tweak this until we get something that we are satisfied with. Okay. The next step is to create the opening for the fuel tank, and this is not gonna be difficult. There are some scripts that are gonna allow us to create these types of holes and openings easily, but for the sake of simplicity and so everyone can understand what's going on, especially beginners, we don't want to be overwhelmed by these tools and stuff. We want to keep things simple and use a simplistic approach to solving problems in 3ds Max. This is actually, I find, the best thing to do. And if I find myself in a situation where I'm gonna have to learn something new, I better you better not show me or tell me that you are gonna use the software plus some plugin that I have to download or buy, and it's gonna be super difficult and frustrating, especially for beginners. Beginner's approach is just to use the standard software, not some plugins, tools, scripts, and shit. This is gonna make it very hard and way too frustrating for beginners. So I try to avoid that as much as possible, unless it is some extremely necessary piece of software that my work cannot be done if I don't use it. For example, Substance Painter for texturing and Marmoset Toolbag for real-time rendering and stuff. These are kind of a must, and they are actually 3D industry standards. They are artists use them quite often these days, especially Substance Painter and Substance Designer for texturing and creating materials for high quality production. It's very necessary, and it makes things easier, of course. So this actually a disclaimer here. When I get to the part when I'm gonna bake stuff and kind of UV unwrap and bake and stuff after the modeling is done. Basically, this part here, this opening, I'm gonna modify it, and I'm gonna do this off screen, so or behind the scenes, so you're not gonna see it. The thing is, I'm gonna add more segments to it to make it more round, because now it is just it's too solid. It has these sides that are too sharp and too edgy. So adding 2 edges to each side is gonna be the answer, and just to make things a little bit smoother, because it doesn't work if we don't do this. It's gonna look ugly. Alright, so now we are trying to kind of move this in using the right axis, which is parents. Of course, local may work as well, as you can see here. And the interesting thing about the scale tool, which can work as we can use it to scale things, and we can use it to kind of create distances and push things apart and push them closer. It can be a quite handy piece of tool, kind of something that has multiple functions to it. Okay, now as you can see here, we are trying to add some more interesting details, but this is gonna cost us some extra edges that we probably don't need. Anyways, this is gonna be on the high poly. When it comes to the low poly version, we're gonna delete it. Alright, we're gonna delete these faces because they are extremely not necessary and not practical at all. Alright, as you can see here, I'm trying to extrude out these edges in order to kind of connect or target well these vertices in order to create that circular or cylindrical shape I'm looking for. So a fast way to do this to kind of weld these vertices is to, instead of using the target weld, I'm gonna select all the vertices and weld them simultaneously. This is gonna be way faster. And I'm gonna tweak actually also this area after I complete the modeling. And the thing is, I'm gonna just push some of the edges, extrude them in and out real quick. All right. For the most part, the modeling process for this fuel tank is over, and we are gonna in the next few minutes of the modeling process, of course, we are going to work on the supporting edges for this fuel tank in order to make it look better when we apply a smoothing modifier, which is gonna be a Turbosmooth. The modeling is the main thing we focused on right now, and we're gonna add this kind of extra extruded area in the bottom. And we're gonna have to add this specific effect right there. So this is gonna be carved inside to the inside. Ring, connect, and of course you're gonna extrude it in. And of course you're gonna make sure that it's gonna be local. So here we are, and this is it for the modeling process, the main part. And let's jump to the next part of the modeling, which is creating supporting edges for the fuel tank. So let's try to place it in the right place, and then we will have to create some supporting edges, which is gonna be interesting. All right, now we're gonna work on the support edges, and as you can see here, there are some things we need to support. There are quite a lot of them, and yeah, we're gonna start with the process that we do always, which is select an edge, ring, connect, and then bring that edge to the very end of the edge that we want to support, that segment that we want to support. All right, so there are some parts where we're gonna try to do this manually, and some parts we're gonna use 3ds Max's tool in order to do it properly. So as you can see here, where there is a possibility for stretching, or there is possibility that these edges are gonna be smooth, we are gonna use the supporting edges that you can see here. And of course, we're gonna use the Turbosmooth Modifier to check and to make sure that what we are trying to do here is working properly. And of course, we don't want the actually, when we create this segment or this edge that is gonna support the corners and where things are gonna be smooth, we want to make sure that the distance is gonna be the distance is gonna be equal between the areas that we want to support. I will show you an example or two later on when we do more of these, because sometimes there's going to be an imbalance in how much the edge is supported overall due to the changing of geometry along the path that the edge is walking, if you understand what I'm saying. And when we apply the Turbosmooth, the model is looking quite good. Okay, keep doing this until you got something beautiful like this. All right. As I said before, this area here needs to be this edge right here in the center needs to be chamfered in order to get more 2 or 3 other edges to make this opening smoother. So after I complete these support edges, I'm gonna do it off screen. So it's really easy to do. You can do it yourself. It's not gonna be big of a deal, and you're gonna get additional edges that you are going to you're going to kind of connect the vertices that are gonna come out of this, or you're gonna weld them, whatever, depending on the method that you're gonna use. Okay, so here we're gonna modify this shape here because it doesn't look pretty. Okay. Weld these, and we are gonna create an inset right there, and of course for a second, these vertices right there don't actually follow a perfect circular shape that we are aiming for, so expanding these out a little bit is gonna help. Alright, now we are gonna apply some beveling and probably extruding to the inside, and create another inset like this. Extrude once again to the outer side. and keep doing this until you get something that looks like what you want. Alright, there is a problem here, which is that there are some vertices or some vertices that are not there, that aren't actually welded. Let's see if this is gonna do it. Alright, done. And to confirm that, when we apply the ring to this, we will get a perfect ring. Now it's time to support these areas right here. And these areas here need to be actually need to be actually smoother like this. There are a lot of segments here, a lot of edges, a lot of vertices, and we want to actually know the limit of where this is gonna be, or the limits should be known, and to know where we need to stop adding geometry and adding poly count to the subject is imperative, because we don't want to overdo it, since there are some modifiers that are gonna cover for that. And actually the high poly is not that we're not that restricted on the amount of vertices we can add. For example, if we are sculpting using ZBrush, we can create this model with a budget of over 1 million polygon if we are gonna add some extraordinary details to it. And of course, we're not gonna use the high poly model for a game, because we're gonna use a low poly model after doing the retopology, and we're gonna bake the high poly on top of the low poly, so we don't have to worry about that too much. Alright, it looks awesome right now. So next we are gonna work on these handles. Based on the reference images, it's not really attached to the main body of the fuel tank, so we will keep it detached. Okay, it's easy to support the edges around these areas because it is quite obvious where we're gonna support them. And if I forget to actually support some segments of this fuel tank, feel free to complete that yourself because I'm not perfect and I sometimes forget to do things, and when I try to do another thing I notice that there are some missing things that I haven't done previously. So this is it for the high poly version. I actually kept the low poly version that we are gonna unwrap, and for now we are done with the modeling, and let's jump to the other new thing, which is gonna be unwrapping. So I hope you learned something from the modeling, and let's do some unwrapping, please. Alright, here we are, and now we're gonna do some unwrapping. So we're gonna apply the unwrap modifier to this low poly version. As I said before, I removed all the Turbosmooth, sorry, and the supporting edges, and I was left with just this, the basic thing before we started to complex things and actually make it high poly version. So we are creating some seams in order to kind of cut this open in order to make it flat on the 2D surface. So we're doing this manually because it is very clear to me how this is gonna unfold. So UV unwrapping this is gonna be easy from this perspective. And there are some rules that we need to respect. For example, 90-degree angle kind of change in the surface needs to be separated. For example, if there is surface that is going to be followed by surface that, and there is a 90-degree between them, we don't want them to be connected. We want them to be separated. And of course, what I am gonna show you later after we do the unwrapping is actually I'm gonna show you quickly how to do the what we call smoothing groups, and smoothing groups is extremely important. We should have done it prior to you doing the UVs, but anyways, I'm gonna show you how to do that later. So now let's focus on actually unwrapping this, and actually I used to do this using the pelt tool, but we don't want to complex things when just the make planar tool is gonna do it, and it's gonna do it just fine. And of course there is a very important tool that people take for granted, which is the peel mode. Actually the quick peel is a lot better at relaxing kind of aisles. It's even better than the relax tool itself, which is ironic. So we're trying to kind of unfold these pieces one by one and try to push them in a place where they're gonna be separated. And we forgot to separate this part, the opening of the fuel tank. So this must be separated. Of course, we're gonna select this one, and of course complete that loop, and of course we're gonna create another seam right there. Okay, let's do this again because it needs to be separated. Didn't work. Alright, that's better. Okay, we'll try to make this straight. Hit X from the keyboard and Y to make this vertical, and X to make it horizontal. I don't remember if this is something that that comes with 3ds Max, or I just did it myself in the interface. Actually, customization and I should say I adjusted how these tools are going to be used using shortcuts and stuff. So X for horizontal lining and Y for the vertical lining. And of course, as you can see here, I'm trying to kind of destroy this part and try to rebuild it again, because trying to do this manually is gonna suck, and it's gonna make it more difficult. So I prefer this method because it's quick and it delivers the results quickly. And to connect or to attach these pieces, I'm using the shortcut Shift S from the keyboard. Shift S to attach. Just keep holding Shift S from the keyboard, or you can just right click and you're gonna find it in the menu. Okay, to resize and rescale these elements, it seems that this belongs to the fuel tank body, main body, so we're gonna resize these again just in case. Okay, I'll X from the keyboard and Y to make this vertical. We're gonna do the same thing here. We're gonna straighten the edge, the outer edges a little bit. We actually should select them one by one. Alright, let's scale these. Let's scale them in a little bit because they are gigantic, enormously gigantic. And so now let's apply just to see actually how this went. Let's just apply a checker material. You can find it online. It's not something difficult. I don't recommend using the checker that comes in 3ds Max because it's not actually gonna give us something truthful, something that is gonna tell us what's going on exactly, because it is an algorithm. We want an image to tell us how the stretching state on the surface of this fuel tank is, which looks fine to me after we unwrap it. So now let's apply the unwrapping modifier to these handles right here, and we're gonna do what we've done previously, which is selecting these edges and cutting these seams, creating these seams in order to unwrap these cylinders. And this is gonna be quick, fairly quick. Of course, we want to deselect these selected seams right there, because at these edges we don't want to convert them into seams because it's gonna be too much. We only want the cylinders. Okay, that's fine. We're gonna make them planar one by one. Open the editor and you're gonna see that this is what we get. Push him away a little bit. So that all make planar, and push it out. Alright, there's a problem with this piece here. It doesn't want to, actually the quick peel is not working properly, so no, this is not a good idea because it's completely separated. So we're gonna leave it as it is for now, and we're gonna figure out this later. So use the quick peel in order to fix them. If they don't work, we're gonna probably use the relax tool, which is gonna probably work. Alright, which is it worked actually, and this is a great result as a start. I love to see a clean unwrapping unfolding from my eyes. It's rewarding, and it gives you the feeling that the texturing process is gonna be a walk in the garden of the prince of the princes, or the kind of there is a garden in France called the Garden of the Prince, which is actually a very beautiful garden. It used to be something fantastic in the 17th and 18th century, and it is beautiful till today. But it's something that a walk through it is kind of a dream, a walk through paradise. That's why I gave you that example. Okay. Now, actually, to unwrap this one, as you've seen me before, I have done. You can do a flatten unwrapping, or you can do box unwrapping, and it's gonna they're gonna probably give you the close results. Doing this manually is gonna be a little bit difficult, and it's not difficult, but I'll probably waste some time and mental energy. So doing it like this is gonna probably save us some time. even though it seems completely destroyed, and it seems like a mess, we're gonna actually figure out how this is gonna be unfolded. So these pieces here need to be attached together. Shift S from the keyboard. And I want just to push the pieces that I work on. We're gonna push them out as soon as we complete unwrapping them. These aisles need to be pushed out. So these are gonna be attached, of course, attached. All right, and we need to straighten these the upper side and the X from the keyboard, or just you can use the icon on top, on the very top, which is gonna allow us to straighten this or align it vertically and horizontally. Okay, this part is gonna be interesting as well. Okay, we're gonna break that. These segments right there need to be left alone, just because they are separated, and there is a 90-degree separation between what's all around them. So we're gonna push them out of the box a little bit in order to arrange them in I can actually organize them in order to see how they are. And of course, you want the aisles that are similar to be close to each other for the sake of organization and making things easier for you. And these small pieces, you might tell yourself that these are kind of random broken pieces, when in fact they are not. They are just a part of the process, because we can't attach these little pieces to any other part, actually, of the unwrapping, because it is gonna be a violation of the one of the most important rules, which is the 90-degree rule, as I like to call it. Wherever we look, there is 90-degree around it, so it's not gonna be attached to any other piece or any other aisle. And the reason for this is when we're gonna be able to understand this when you understand the smoothing groups, because and the smoothing groups also is related to creating perfect normal maps. And if you attach these little aisles to another aisle, you're gonna violate, or you're gonna contradict the actually how the smoothing groups work. And if you do violate the kind of the function of the smoothing group, you're gonna violate how the kind of the normal maps work, and this is gonna be problematic. So these three elements need to work hand in hand in order to see something beautiful or even perfect when we apply these steps that I'm going to show you. So smoothing groups, UVs, and normal maps. These are kind of they work in a sequence, and you need to get them right every time in order to get good normal maps that are gonna show perfectly or show a perfect on your low poly version, and is gonna convey the feeling that the high poly is actually or the low poly is actually capturing all the details of the high poly version. Okay, we will try to arrange these little pieces in a sequence. We're gonna try to put them side by side or on top of each other. Alright, we're gonna try to push this up there and kind of apply the checker to it. And as you can see here, it is actually doing great. And we need to scale this up and down in order to match the scale of the main element, which is the fuel tank body. All right, now we as you seen me do this, it was actually I attached all the elements, all the parts of the fuel tank, and yeah, converted them to edible poly, attach them together, and now we can see all the elements of the all actually the unwrapped parts of all the fuel tank elements. So it's time to bring them all together, and this is called packing UVs. Alright, so remember this term, which is called packing UVs. So now we are trying to pack these UVs together inside that rectangle that we are allowed to push or to put them in. And we're gonna respect some rules, of course. We need to keep the proportion of the pieces realistic. Sometimes there is an exception, which is just to make the smaller pieces a little bit bigger in order to actually, when in the texturing process, we want actually texture to actually cover these small pieces, and if they are too small, probably they're not gonna catch actually the texture that we're gonna apply on top of it. Probably keeping it this part here, I was actually hesitated in whether I'm gonna actually fix it or not, and finally I decided that I'm gonna keep it as it is, because this might cause distortions and stuff down the road. So scaling this down, and of course we need to scale them all together just and as one piece. And the biggest piece here is the fuel tank body. We need to actually scale it down even more and scale it in order for it to fit inside this rectangle. And it seems like there is an abundance of space here, so we'll try our best in order to fill this space properly. And since we have extra space right there, it is good actually to separate these pieces and not push them all together in one little place. And to use this space even more properly, we need to actually scale up a little bit some of the small pieces in order for a better texturing and for a better looking UV template. Of course, this is also a good reason, because you don't want your UV template to look kind of misused and empty. It's not good, and it's a bad habit. It's a bad habit, of course, to misuse your UV template. You want to look professional, right? Even though you're not at this stage. Fake it until you make it. And of course, you need to, in order to become better in art, you need to do what the professional artists do. And one day you're gonna fake it until you become it one day. And it's of course it is a process. So we're done with the unwrapping, and next thing we're gonna do some baking. So yeah, I hope you learned something. I will see you in the next process. All right, here we are after we unwrapped the low poly version. It is time just to kind of bake the textures of from the high poly to the low poly. And as you can see here, we are applying a pure white material to the low poly version and the high poly as well for baking purposes. So we need now to actually create smoothing groups for these elements. What you're gonna do is just to select the element, clear all, and then auto smooth it properly. And then you're gonna remove the edge, the edge faces to see where there are some issues with the mesh after we apply the smoothing groups. Okay, and to make sure that these actually polygons are having the same smoothing groups, we need to sometimes check manually. For example, let's see here. I know if this is very new to you, you are probably not going to understand it the first time. So these smoothing groups actually tell us where the smoothing is actually continuous and where it is being cut off, or where there are going to be separate separate surfaces that are having the same or a different smoothing smooth look to them. So as you can see here, I'm shifting the smoothing group of that surface from 1 to 2 in order to kind of let them have the same smoothing group in order to have a smooth look. So now I am trying to push or to separate the element of the fuel tank in order to get or to perform the exploded bake, as we call it. And you don't have to animate them. Just I do this because I want my my model to be brought together when I want to. This is the purpose of it. And of course, we want actually to explode the high poly version in order for it to match the low poly version. And this is the this is the purpose of the bake in the first place, to actually bake the high poly version on top of the low poly version. Okay, let's try to get as close as possible. Okay, after we did this, it is time to check if everything is running perfectly. Okay, let's apply skylight there. Actually applying a white material to the high poly and low poly versions, and then applying a skylight are kind of elements or steps that are gonna allow us to get a good bake. Alright, let's open the texture or render to texture dialog 0 from the keyboard, or you can go to rendering and you're gonna find it down the list, render to texture. So we're picking the high poly version in order to apply projection to it. We're gonna disable ray miss check, and of course we're gonna always use existing channel, and we're gonna pick the complete map and normal map, and we're gonna change the resolution to 512 each. And now we are gonna go to render to choose the ray tracer, and we're gonna use the Marmoset. Where is it? And here it is. We're gonna use a global super sampler, which is gonna be Marmoset. You probably need to pause the video and go back a little bit to recap on what I've done in these few seconds, because this is very important. So now we're gonna reset the cage properly, and we are gonna increase the amount until the cage actually covers the high poly version, and this is extremely important. Actually the high poly version needs to be covered by the cage completely in order to get a bake in the first place, let alone having a perfect bake or a good bake for this matter. Okay, let's test things out and let's see how the baking process is gonna take place. It seems like there are a lot of missing parts, and some of the areas on the left top corner are completely missed. And let's see what is the reason why. And the reason is that these parts were completely not attached to the high poly version that we selected, so they were completely not related to the bake in the first place. So now, as you can see here, they are completely inside the map that we are baking. And there are some minor issues with the bake that we are getting right here, because there are some red areas. Of course, to see this, you need to check the miss rate check. All right, here is the actually you're gonna find this low quality kind of normal map in the folder that you selected up above. So there is I noticed that there is a problem with the high poly version, which is the fact that I forgot to activate the Turbosmooth on top when we performed the bake. So that's why we've seen that distortion on the normal map bake. So let's do it again after we added the Turbosmooth, and we need to change the resolution this time to as you can see here, there is a terrible problem right there. I just jumped and fixed actually the resolution, and here is the 2K render. I hope you enjoyed this video, and leave a question down below if you have any of them. Alright, before we start the texturing process in Substance Painter, we need to do something in 3ds Max, which is importing or exporting some files of the low poly and high poly versions of this fuel tank in order to cover what we need once we are working in Substance Painter. So if this is the low poly version, we need to select it and then export selected, and you're going to create a folder in which you are going to, for example, you are gonna export it. Let's just say fuel tank FT, just like this, low poly. All right, so we're gonna export it as FBX or OBJ. So let's choose FBX for instance. Save like this, and it is exported. Or you can just export it using the OBJ, I should say rather, and it's gonna be fine. And you're gonna walk through a dialog. Example, let's just export it as an OBJ. Right, like this. Let's just say low poly, and yeah, save. And you're gonna export like this, and once we are done, it is done like that. And we're gonna do the same thing for the high poly. So let's unhide the high poly and hide the low poly version. And of course, we're gonna do the same thing, and it must be one freaking piece, for God's sake. All right, so let's do what we've done before. Actually, this is another file. So this is gonna be for the sake of demonstration. So attach it like this, and of course you're gonna have to do the same thing. Export selected, and you're gonna save it whatever name you choose to save it with. All right, so now let's jump to Substance Painter and start working on the textures. Alright, here we are in Substance Painter 2.1, which is a marvelous piece of software. So the first thing we're going to do once we are here is to create a new custom file like this. And what you're going to do is to select this here mesh selection and choose your low poly version, and here you're going to have to actually set the resolution of the document. Alright, here, okay, and let's see. Alright, so this is our low poly version of the fuel tank in Substance Painter, and there is one important thing we need to do in order to get Substance Painter to give us the result we want, which is to bake the textures inside Substance Painter. We actually seen how to bake the normal maps inside 3ds Max, and that was a good exercise. But in order to see the full potential of texturing inside Substance Painter, we need to bake the materials in Substance Painter, or the textures, or the maps, or whatever we want to call them. So here is the normal map, there is a word space map, there is an ID map, ambient occlusion map, curvature, especially the ambient occlusion and curvature, and the normal map are the most important ones. So what we're going to do is to actually hit bake textures. Let's go to common. We better select whatever resolution your texture was in, our map is 2K, and let's set the dilation to about 15 or 16, whatever, something close to this. And now it is time to select your high definition meshes. You're gonna hit this little box here. You're gonna use this outsourcing button here just to kind of help you get the high poly version. And here, as you can see here, we need to match by mesh name here, and initialize. The initializing here is gonna be, or super sampling is gonna be 2x2 as a start, because you want to first test how fast your computer is and how capable is it when it comes to handling the baking process inside Substance Painter. And of course here normals is actually related to the common parameters. We don't have to work on it right now. The word ID, the ID here, let's make it by mesh ID, and this is gonna be color generator random. Occlusion, we better push this to something like 250 to 56, something like that. And so occlusion by mesh name. Curvature, this is gonna be something like this. I'm gonna leave it as it is. There is nothing we can change. And the thickness as well, probably we're gonna push this to something like 256 or something. All right. And self-occlusion by always same mesh name, of course. So these are the parameters of the bake, and let's see. I actually baked these previously and I got some cool results. So you're gonna start the bake like this, and once we're done, I'm gonna show you the results. Alright, this is actually the results I got after baking the normal maps and all the other maps on top of the low poly version. As you can see here, it is almost a perfect bake, especially in these areas, small little areas where you can see the difference, and it is looking super fine for me. So now I'm gonna show you how to actually get the result that you can see here just prior to beginning of the texturing. I'm gonna show you what I got. All right, this is how your fuel tank should look like once we are done with the texturing, which is gonna be fairly quick. You're gonna be surprised how efficient this software is. It is amazing. It can do hours of work in a few minutes. It's marvelous. It's amazing, actually, to say the least. So we're going to remove this, for instance, and let's just delete it and delete this as well. So what we're going to use first is a smart material, which is going to be the paint, steel paint smart material. So let's drop it right there quickly. And the first thing you're going to see is this amazing looking fuel tank without doing anything, just dropping a smart material on top of it. Isn't that amazing? All right, so now let's try to make some adjustments. So let's go to paint, the paint mask, and go to MG mask editor. And here we're gonna find the textures that they applied in order to get the thing that we are seeing here. So let's choose linear dodge here, which is one of the options we are gonna have. It actually is gonna give us something marvelous, something beautiful like this. And what we're gonna do is to change some of the parameters right here. And beware that Substance Painter is also a real-time rendering software. That's why you need to have a strong graphic card in order to see the results taking place as you do the texturing process. As you can see here, this bar is loading here just to tell you how the progress is being made. All right, the scale, you can change the scale as well. And you can play with the with the parameters as much as you want. It is just amazing. All right, so we can change the curvature as well, how sharp things are, and it's there are a lot of options you can choose from. And this is actually, we can say that this software is actually a software. It's a parametric software, to say the least, because we are just changing the parameters and it is doing the job for us. And this is actually something revolutionary for the, I would say, 3 to 5 years in the CG and 3D industry. It is a powerful software that is changing the rules of the game. People who used to use Photoshop are actually behind right now, because this can do marvelous work in few minutes or a few hours. You're gonna get something out of the ordinary world. It's gonna be it's gonna be uncharted territory, what you can do with this software. So for now, I'm gonna apply for the cover of the opening of the fuel tank. I'm gonna probably use something like plastic, fake plastic like this. Since this is gonna be this smart material, actually this is plastic fake leather. To apply the smart material on top of everything is gonna be not something we want. So we will add a black mask to it. All right, so this black mask, and let's select this tool here, which is polygon fill, and of course we're gonna use elements. And what we're gonna do is to select the element that we want to be applied to. We want the plastic to be applied to, and as you can see here, it is the only thing that the plastic is being applied to. For now, let's select the plastic material and go to let's see. We can add some things here, but it seems like there is it looks fine to me for now, because I just wanted to add some generators here, which is gonna be something that we're gonna talk about later. But for the sake of showing you how to just as a start or as an introductory level video on Substance Painter, I just wanted to show you how to do this fairly quick. And I assume and I believe that this result is interesting. If we look at how much time we spent doing this, which is gonna be around 15 minutes, and yeah, I hope you enjoyed some of the things I showed you inside Sepsis Painter. And to export the materials, you're going to just right click and export textures, and you're gonna select where your textures are gonna be located after that, and you're gonna export them, and you're gonna get something interesting. Once we are done with the export, we're gonna get a lot of materials, and of course maps rather than materials, we should say. For now, let's go to actually use Marmoset Toolbag in order to see how to apply these textures in a real object, low poly object, and make it look something like what we can see here in Sepsis Painter. Alright, here we are in Marvellous, or actually in Marmoset Toolbag 3, and let's open or import the model quickly. You're gonna import the model and choose where the file is. Alright, here is the low poly model, or low poly version of the fuel tank, and what we're gonna do now is to apply the maps that we created and we exported from the Sepsis Painter in here. And I'm gonna show you these maps, and I'm gonna apply them one by one on top of our model. So here we are now inside Photoshop, and these are the materials or the maps we exported from Sepsis Painter. They look ugly, but in fact they can do the job very well. So this is the color map, or this is Albedo, or whatever you want to call it, and this is the normal map, and it can do a pretty good job as well. This is the roughness, and this is the metallic map. These are actually the 4 maps we need inside Marmoset Toolbag, and inside any other software we choose to apply these textures to. So the first thing, we're gonna apply the normal map here inside the normal. We're gonna have to select this one here and apply it to this one in order to see what's going on. So we're gonna select the normal maps. I'm gonna stop the video in order to save you the time. I'm gonna search for these files. As you can see here, this is the normal map applied, and it comes with a lot of good details here from Sepsis Painter. It is amazing how detailed the normal map is. This is amazing quality compared to the bake of that came from 3ds Max. Now we're gonna apply the albedo, or the base color map. Alright, the base color map is actually giving us more interesting base color things going on here, which is good as a start. Now we're gonna go to the gloss map, or the roughness. We're gonna apply to it. Alright, after we applied the roughness map, you're gonna see something wrong here, which is not wrong at all. We just need to invert this to get that what we want. And it seems like the normal map is not working properly, so I'm gonna have to do this, flip those two to get it to work the way we want it to. Okay. And finally, we need to the metallic map, or Metalness. Of course, we need to put it here in the Specular section, or Reflectivity. Alright, this adds a lot of interesting things here. It makes things look great again. And what we want to do is to shift this to Metalness. Alright, so this is it for applying the textures in Marmoset Toolbag. I hope you enjoyed this tutorial. If you did, please leave me a like and subscribe if you will, and leave me a comment if you ask me about anything. And thank you for of course our Patreons for making this possible, because this is actually something that takes a lot of time, a lot of work, a lot of energy. And for those who are willing to support me on Patreon, you are welcome. And I'll see you in the next tutorial. Thank you very much.